On Christmas Day in 1989, as gunfire reverberated throughout a military base in Targov, Romania, the world observed the demise of one of Eastern Europe's most infamous communist regimes. Nicolae Ceaușescu and his spouse Elena, who had governed Romania with an oppressive grip for 24 years, underwent a swift trial before being executed by firing squad. However, while the dictator and his wife faced their grim fate in front of cameras, three questions lingered unanswered. Where were their children? What transpired during the tumult of the revolution? And how does one endure when their parents are the most reviled individuals in the nation? Today, we delve into the largely overlooked narrative of Valentin, Zoya, and Nicu Ceaușescu, three individuals whose lives were irrevocably shaped by their surname and whose destinies illuminate the complex aftermath of the collapse of tyranny. To comprehend what befell the Ceaușescu children, we must first grasp the regime their parents established. When Nicolae Ceaușescu ascended to power in 1965, he initially portrayed himself as a reformist. Romania established diplomatic ties with West Germany and condemned the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. For a brief period, Romania appeared ready to forge an independent path within the communist bloc. Yet by the 1970s, any hope for liberalization had vanished. Ceaușescu constructed a personality cult that rivaled that of North Korea's Kim Il-sung. His image was ubiquitous. State media hailed him as the genius of the Carpathians and conductor. His spouse Elena, despite her limited educational background, was recognized as a globally acclaimed scientist. Beneath this cult of personality existed a harsh security apparatus. Neighbors kept watch on one another. Children reported on their parents. Dissent was suppressed with ruthless efficiency. By the 1980s, Ceaușescu's economic strategies had plunged Romania into dire poverty. Aiming to settle Romania's foreign debt, he exported the nation's agricultural and industrial output, leaving the Romanian populace to endure severe food shortages, electricity rationing, and unheated homes during the bitter winters. Meanwhile, the Ceaușescu family resided in extraordinary luxury as their parents tightened their control over Romania. What sort of lives did the Ceaușescu children experience? And how did their privileged upbringing equip or fail to equip them for the eventual collapse? Unlike many dictators who prepared their offspring for succession, Nicolae Ceaușescu never publicly named an heir. Nevertheless, his three children, Valentin, Zoya, and Nicu, each held privileged roles within Romanian society. Let us introduce them one by one. Valentin Ceaușescu, born in 1948, was the eldest and, by most accounts, the least engaged in political affairs. With a doctorate in nuclear physics, he chose to pursue a career in science rather than in government. Valentin was married 3 times. His first marriage to Iordana Barila, the daughter of another high-ranking communist official, united 2 of Romania's most influential families. Subsequent marriages to Tamara Doran and Roxana Andreescu followed. Despite his scientific qualifications, Valentin was not entirely detached from Romania's power dynamics. He served as a member of the Central Committee of the Romanian Communist Party and held a significant role as chairman of Romania's Football Federation, granting him authority over Steaua Bucharest, the Army's football club that achieved European championship status in 1986. In contrast to his siblings, Valentin kept a relatively low profile. Romanians regarded him as the most typical Ceaușescu, an individual who at least made an effort to carve out his own identity beyond the influence of his father. Zoya Ceaușescu, the middle child and the sole daughter, was born in 1949 and represented a distinct intellectual lineage within the family. Similar to her brother, she chose to pursue a career in science instead of politics, obtaining a doctorate in mathematics and working at the Institute of Mathematics of the Romanian Academy. Among the 3 siblings, Zoya cultivated the most independent reputation. Reports indicate that she occasionally voiced criticism of her parents' policies and lifestyle, albeit only in private contexts. Her relationship with her mother was particularly strained, as Elena was reportedly disapproving of Zoya's lifestyle and decisions. Zoya entered into marriage with Mircea Opran, an engineer, and maintained a relatively lower public profile compared to her brothers. Nevertheless, she could not escape the privileges associated with being a Ceaușescu. Like her siblings, she experienced luxuries that were unimaginable to ordinary Romanians during the austerity years of the 1980s. Nicu Ceaușescu, born in 1951, was widely regarded as Nicolae's favorite child and the presumptive heir. In contrast to his siblings, Nicu fully embraced politics, serving as the secretary of the Romanian Communist Youth Union and subsequently as the party secretary of Sibiu County, a traditional pathway to higher office. Nicu earned a notorious reputation as a playboy with a violent disposition. Tales of drunken car accidents, assaults on women, and abuses of power were widely circulated among Romanians. In one infamous episode, he allegedly struck and killed a young woman with his vehicle while intoxicated, facing no legal repercussions. By the late 1980s, rumors began to circulate that Nicolae was preparing Nicu to succeed him. The younger Ceaușescu's ruthless character and unwavering loyalty to his father positioned him as a plausible heir to Romania's communist dynasty. While the children lived lives of extreme privilege, ominous signs were emerging. As 1989 approached, the communist regimes of Eastern Europe began to collapse one after another. How would the Ceaușescu children react when revolution finally reached the borders of Romania? What fate awaited them when their parents confronted the ultimate judgment? In December 1989, as communist regimes crumbled throughout Eastern Europe, Romania's moment finally arrived. The initial spark ignited in Timișoara, where protests against the eviction of Hungarian pastor Laszlo quickly evolved into widespread anti-government demonstrations. Ceaușescu, upon returning from a state visit to Iran, commanded a ruthless crackdown that resulted in hundreds of fatalities. On December 21st, he orchestrated a mass rally in Bucharest, anticipating a reaffirmation of his authority. Instead, the crowd turned against him. For the first time, Romanians witnessed their leader standing perplexed as boos and jeers disrupted his speech. Within hours, Bucharest erupted into revolution. The Ceaușescus fled by helicopter from the rooftop of the Central Committee building, abandoning the capital as protesters stormed government facilities. 3 days later, on Christmas Day, after being captured in Târgoviște, the dictator and his wife were subjected to a hastily convened military tribunal charged with genocide, the destruction of the national economy, and personal enrichment at the expense of the country. They underwent a summary trial that lasted less than an hour. The verdict was never in question. Both Nicolae and Elena were sentenced to death and executed by firing squad moments later. Their bodies, riddled with bullets, were broadcast on Romanian television that evening, serving as graphic confirmation that the Ceaușescu era had concluded. However, as Romanians rejoiced in the streets, a pressing question arose. What would become of their children? As revolution swept across Romania, the Ceaușescu children found themselves in vastly different situations. Valentin was arrested on December 25, 1989, the very day his parents were executed. Unlike his brother Nicu, he did not resist. Despite lacking an official position within the government, his surname alone rendered him a target for revolutionary forces. Valentin was imprisoned at the Rahova military facility in Bucharest, where he would remain for the subsequent year. His arrest was precautionary rather than founded on explicit charges, illustrating the new government's indecision regarding the Ceaușescu family. Zoia, similar to her older brother, was apprehended on December 25th when revolutionary forces came for her. She reportedly exhibited no signs of surprise. Perhaps she had foreseen this moment, or had already received news of her parents' execution. Like Valentin, Zoia was taken to Rahova prison. She upheld her inherent dignity throughout her arrest. According to testimonies from witnesses, as a mathematician with no direct involvement in governance, her detention seemed more symbolic than substantive. Nicu's experience was markedly different. As the party's secretary of Cebu County, he initially sought to quell local protests through military force. When this approach failed, he fled, seemingly in an attempt to escape Romania. On December 22nd, revolutionary forces apprehended Nicu in Cebu. In contrast to his siblings' quiet arrests, Nicu's capture became a public spectacle. Footage depicts him being paraded through hostile crowds, visibly injured, with revolutionary forces barely managing to shield him from mob violence. Nicu's detention had more substantial legal grounds than that of his siblings. As a government official who had commanded security forces to open fire on protesters, he faced specific charges related to the fatalities of demonstrators in CBU. In the tumultuous months following the revolution, Romania's new government, the National Salvation Front, led by former communist officials who had turned against Ceaușescu, initiated trials for the dictator's children. The cases against Valentin and Zoia were relatively weak. Prosecutors found it challenging to pinpoint specific crimes beyond their familial ties to the ousted dictator. Valentin was charged with undermining the national economy, a claim associated with his role in the Football Federation rather than any governmental position. Prosecutors accused him of illegally redirecting funds to support Steaua Bucharest, although evidence of personal gain was limited. Zoia faced similar economic allegations, which were equally weak. Her profession as a mathematician provided prosecutors with little substantial evidence. Instead, they concentrated on her lifestyle, claiming she had inappropriately profited from state resources. After nearly a year in detention, both Valentin and Zoia were acquitted and released in late 1990. The court determined that there was insufficient evidence to prove that either had committed prosecutable offenses, despite their privileged status in Romanian society. Nicu's trial unfolded differently. As the party's secretary of CBU, he had given direct orders to security forces during the revolution. Prosecutors charged him with genocide, the same accusation made against his father for the deaths of 89 protesters in Cebu. Throughout his trial, Nicu exhibited an unrepentant demeanor that distanced him from many Romanians. He expressed little remorse for the fatalities in Cebu, instead presenting himself as a loyal official executing orders during a crisis. In 1990, the court found Nicu guilty of aggravated murder rather than genocide, sentencing him to 20 years in prison. He became the highest-ranking official convicted of violence during the revolution, although many Romanians felt his punishment should have been more severe. With their parents deceased and their family names associated with tyranny, how would the Ceaușescu children reconstruct their lives? Could they ever break free from their notorious legacy? And how would Romanian society respond to the descendants of their former oppressors? Following his release in late 1990, Valentin Ceaușescu emerged as the most successful in rebuilding his life. He resumed his scientific endeavors. Although he was not at the same level of prominence as before, he recognized that his surname would always be a defining factor in Romania, and thus he chose to keep a low profile. In 1992, Valentin commenced legal actions to recover some of his parents' confiscated assets, which included personal items. This initiated a lengthy legal struggle that persisted until 2014, when the courts finally awarded him ownership of certain possessions, such as books and personal effects. Perhaps the most notable action taken by Valentin after the revolution was his legal battle concerning the remains of Nicolae and Elena. For many years following their hurried burial in Ghența cemetery under assumed names, the location of the Ceaușescu's graves remained unmarked. Valentin spearheaded family efforts to establish proper burial markers, ultimately achieving success in securing identified gravestones in 2010. Unlike many offspring of ousted dictators, Valentin never permanently departed from Romania. Instead, he cultivated a serene existence in Bucharest, occasionally granting measured interviews regarding his family, while largely steering clear of political matters. Now at the age of 77, he stands as the last surviving Ceaușescu, a quiet observer of both his family's ascent and decline. Zoya's life after prison was significantly shorter than that of her brothers. Following her release in 1990, she sought to return to mathematics, although professional opportunities were scarce. Similar to Valentin, she engaged in legal efforts to reclaim family properties and belongings. Friends characterized Zoya's post-revolution years as being plagued by recurrent depression. The execution of her parents and the disintegration of her previous life left profound psychological scars. While she upheld her dignity in public, private accounts indicate that she found it challenging to adjust to her drastically altered circumstances. In 1998, Romanian media unveiled distressing news. Zoia Ceaușescu succumbed to lung cancer at the age of 49. Her passing took place at Fundeni Hospital in Bucharest, where her brother Valentin organized a private funeral. Some Romanians speculated that the stress stemming from her family's downfall and her experiences in prison may have contributed to her untimely death. During her brief life after the revolution, Zoia published a single book, which was a collection of mathematical papers, and participated in only a few interviews. After divorcing her husband, who had distanced himself from her during the revolution, she never remarried. Additionally, she did not have any children. With her passing, another chapter in the Ceaușescu narrative came to a close. Nicu's post-revolution journey took a different path. Initially sentenced to 20 years, he served merely 4 years before being granted a medical release in 1992. While incarcerated, doctors diagnosed him with cirrhosis of the liver, likely a consequence of his well-documented alcoholism. Following his release, Nicu's health continued to decline rapidly. Unlike his siblings, he exhibited little desire to reconstruct his life, instead giving sporadic inflammatory interviews in defense of his father's regime. These remarks further estranged him from Romanian society. In November 1996, just 4 years after his release and less than 7 years post-revolution, Nicu Ceaușescu passed away from liver cirrhosis at Vienna's General Hospital. He was 45 years old. Reports suggest he had traveled to Austria in search of specialized treatment that was unavailable in Romania, but his condition had advanced too significantly. Nicu's funeral at Bucharest's Ghența cemetery drew a small gathering of former regime officials and curious onlookers. He was interred close to the graves of his parents, although at that time, those graves were unmarked. Over 3 decades following the Romanian Revolution, what is left of the Ceaușescu dynasty? One significant legacy pertains to ongoing disputes over property. The Ceaușescu family possessed numerous residences, land parcels, and personal valuables, the majority of which were confiscated during the revolution. Through relentless legal efforts, Valentin managed to recover some possessions, including family photographs, books, and artwork. In 2014, a Romanian court mandated the state to return a hunting lodge and land near Bucharest to Valentin. This ruling sparked considerable controversy, with many Romanians contending that the properties of the Ceaușescu family represented ill-gotten gains that ought to remain in public ownership. These legal conflicts underscore Romania's unresolved connection with its communist history. In contrast to several other former Eastern Bloc nations, Romania has not enacted comprehensive lustration laws to confront the crimes and assets of the communist era. leaving cases such as the Ceaușescu properties in a state of legal uncertainty for decades. How do Romanians perceive the Ceaușescu children in contemporary times? Surveys indicate that the majority of Romanians differentiate between the parents, who are still largely condemned, and their offspring, especially Valentin and Zoia, who are regarded more as beneficiaries of privilege rather than as active contributors to tyranny. Nicu's legacy, however, remains more contentious. His involvement in the CBU crackdown ensures that he is remembered as more than just the son of the dictator. Nevertheless, even his legacy has somewhat softened over time, with younger Romanians lacking any personal recollection of him or his deeds. Interestingly, a form of Ceaușescu nostalgia has surfaced in present-day Romania, particularly among older individuals who feel disillusioned with post-communist capitalism. This sentiment seldom includes efforts to rehabilitate the Ceaușescu children, instead concentrating on the perceived stability during Nicolae's early reign. The narrative of the Ceaușescu children illustrates how dynastic aspirations can disintegrate in an instant, rendering once privileged heirs unexpectedly exposed. However, their varied destinies also highlight distinct strategies for coping with the downfall of an authoritarian parent. From Nicu's rebellion to Valentin's subtle adjustment, what insights might these accounts provide for other offspring of dictatorial figures? The tale of the Ceaușescu children presents a distinctive perspective on the consequences of dictatorship. Unlike numerous ousted leaders who fled with their families to secure exile, the execution of Nicolae and Elena left their children to confront revolutionary justice independently. Their outcomes, Valentin's survival, Zoya's premature demise, and Nicu's self-sabotage, illustrate different reactions to a devastating familial collapse. Nicu, for instance, clung to his father's legacy, which accelerated his own downfall, while Valentin adapted, discovering a quiet way forward in the very nation his parents had oppressed. Presently, the Ceaușescu name remains notorious in Romania, yet the passage of time has begun to shift raw animosity into historical evaluation. Young Romanians born post-1989 may recognize the name Ceaușescu, but possess minimal emotional ties to it. For them, the dictator and his family symbolize history rather than personal experience. This transformation may offer the story's ultimate lesson. Even the mightiest dynasties eventually recede into the annals of history, their transgressions and privileges becoming mere footnotes in the collective memory of the nation. The Ceaușescu children, once anticipated to inherit a communist empire, ultimately received only its disintegration. Their narrative serves as a poignant reminder of both the fleeting nature of political authority and the lasting influence of a family name that can never be escaped. If you found this analysis of the Ceaușescu family's decline enlightening, we invite you to subscribe to our channel for additional historical content that explores the human narratives behind significant political occurrences. Thank you for viewing.